As I always do in this series of board game product reviews, I'm going to start with the hook. The thing which sets the game apart from its competitors. The thing which attracts the attention of purchasers. The thing which has led a publisher to greenlight the project in the first place. So without further ado, the hook is an engine building game about running a farm. I'm not sure that's going to fly. There are rather a lot of games about... No, it's like Machi Koro. That game sold over 1 million copies, but this one, it's got a slightly different theme. But we can't just repackage an existing game and release it as a new product. No, hang on, it's not the same. In this game you roll 3 dice on your turn instead of 2, and then you choose which dice you use to activate your cards, which gives you marginally more control. But otherwise it is pretty much like Machi Koro. No, it's not! I've removed all of the Take That cards. Okay, so we have our hook. It's a slightly more strategic Machi Koro with slightly less interaction. Screw it, let's go with the farm thing. I'm Adam Porter and I design games, and in this video series I'm looking at board games and reviewing them with a focus on product design. I'll be discussing gameplay too, so you should get an idea of whether the game might work for you. My Farm Shop was released by Pegasus Spiele, hitting wide distribution early in 2021. It's designed by Rudiger Dorn, the celebrated designer of Istanbul, Goa and Luxor. My Farm Shop is for 2 to 4 players and it can be played in 30 to 40 minutes. It should be pretty manageable for families, but it's got enough going on to interest adult groups too. In My Farm Shop, each player has their own player board with fields numbered 2 to 12, and on your turn you roll 3 dice. You use one result to select a card from the central display, and these cards will upgrade your fields, giving better rewards. Then all players simultaneously use the remaining 2 dice to activate the field which equals the combined total of the dice results, gaining whatever goods are shown on their field. So this might be honey or eggs or milk or wool, or it might convert goods into victory points or sunflowers. You can spend burlap bags to modify your dice results, and sunflowers increase the yield of your fields. Each time you activate a field with a sunflower, you gain 1 additional good of the type shown. The game ends when the display can't be refilled and the highest scorer wins. My journey with My Farm Shop started when I spotted the game on a game store shelf. It doesn't look like many other games. The composition of the front cover immediately recalled Dream Home, which is a lovely card drafting game that I really enjoy. And Pegasus Spiele, well, they're a reliable publisher. I'm rarely let down by their products, and Rudiger Dorn has produced some of my favourite games of all time, including the exceptional dice game Las Vegas. My wife, well, she loves growing vegetables, and when she isn't growing vegetables, she's often playing video games about growing vegetables. So I thought a board game about growing vegetables might be just what we needed, you know, to shake things up a bit. For several months I didn't buy the game, but I always teetered on the brink. A string of positive reviews on my YouTube feed pushed me over the edge and I finally pulled the trigger on it. I wasn't excited about it, but the pedigree behind the game made me feel pretty secure in my purchase. The term onboarding describes the various steps that a purchaser has to take to go from a state of total ignorance about a product to becoming a fully engaged user. And in the case of My Farm Shop, the box cover was a blessing and a curse. Without such a distinctive style, I don't think I would have ever noticed the game at all. I've never purchased the similarly themed Récolte, despite its beautiful cover, just because it never leaps out and screams at me from the game store shelves. It sits shyly at the back of the shop, reassuring me, "Don't worry about little old me. I won't be offended if you walk on by. I'll be here next month if you want me." But despite standing out, the cover art on My Farm Shop was enough to keep me at arm's length. The game cover looks like something you'd see for a $5 on the Nintendo eShop. The sort of video game my wife might pick up while waiting for the next Harvest Moon or Story of Seasons to drop, and get maybe an hour or so's play out of it before regretting her purchase. But let's get away from these preconceptions about the game. Forget those horrible eShop games and mobile apps, and look at the promises that the cover of My Farm Shop makes. So number 1, this is a game about running a shop. I'm expecting to manage stock, to balance the books, to deal with customers. And number 2, the qualifier, My Farm Shop, recalls My Little Pony, My First Stone Age, My Little Scythe. It suggests that the game is going to be playable by youngsters. A great cover tells you what you're going to be doing in the game, but also how you're going to feel when you play. And this is where I think the cover fails. It's so passive. The lady looks pretty content, but that's about it. There's no specific emotion. It's almost like she's posing for the camera, fake smile and all. The best I can glean from this cover is that it's going to be a pleasant experience, a gentle experience. Look at the excitement in the face of the dream home kid. Look at the parents clinging on to the house keys as they gaze lovingly at their new home. Look at the children on the expansion box. Look how much fun they're having. Who knows what's going on behind these dead eyes? Here's my customer journey map. This charts my mood from learning about the game to setting it up, playing that first game and putting it away again. And you'll see that I was never particularly excited. But neither was I sad. It was all fine. The rulebook made sense, though it was pretty substantial for a relatively simple game. Setting up and tearing down the game does involve messing around with a bunch of fiddly little pieces, but no more so than in many other games of this type. The lack of interaction was notable, but I don't need that if I'm engaged in my own little puzzle. It made little difference to me whether I won or lost. The experience was much the same either way. And I didn't come out of the game itching to explore new strategies and unearth hidden layers in the game. Basically, the experience stayed much the same from one game to the next. If we chart the pain points in the product, well, there aren't really any. If you enjoy interaction, well, I guess there's not much here for you. You might want to consider whether your move is benefiting your opponents, since your dice roll activates their fields as well as your own. But generally speaking, you're going to be more focused on your own board and scoring points for yourself. In my video about engaging players, I described the 5 key facets of board games which tend to hook me. These are thematic immersion, meaningful interactions, challenge and stress, feedback, and meaningful choices. Now, a game doesn't need to excel in all of these categories to keep me engaged, but featuring a number of these elements in any combination is likely to pull me in. If we allocate 0 to 3 points for each of these categories, we end up with a score out of 15, and a game which scores 10 or above is likely to be a real favourite with me. So let's see how my farm shop fares. Its strongest selling point, the theme, is also its weakest attribute. It doesn't come through at all. There are no customers, there's no growing of crops, no financial worries, no vegetables. What we have is a spreadsheet with some pretty generic artwork and a dice game which is all about playing the odds. The gentle gameplay means that you never really feel stressed. There are no attacks to ward off from the other players, no costs that you have to pay, there's no events which you need to prepare for. The game isn't mindless at all. There are choices to be made on every turn, which dice to allocate to your fields and which ones you're going to use to draft a new field. You might want to think about the impact on your opponents of activating certain dice, since they're going to get a kickback every single time. A decent understanding of probability is going to help you as well, knowing which dice rolls are more likely to occur and positioning your fields accordingly. The high points in the game come when your carefully prepared plan pays off. Those lucky dice rolls which activate just the right field at just the right moment, generating just the right resources, the things that you need. So I've scored the game high for feedback, but it still only manages to make it 6 rungs up my engagement ladder. Not a disastrous score, but not enough to make the game truly memorable. So let's move on to my product design checklist. Number 1, is it innovative? No, not at all. I mean, the gameplay is very similar to other games like Machi, Koro and Space Base. There's a nice twist with the 3rd die determining the new card which you add to your tableau each turn. But it's a fairly tried and tested formula. For real innovation in this space, you might want to check out Dice Forge, which says, forget creating a spreadsheet for your different dice results. Why not just change up the dice themselves? Number 2, does my farm shop solve a need? Well, not really. I mean, it's nice to see a prominent female character on a game box. The package does make quite a statement that modern board games are not just for stuffy old blokes obsessed with dragons and spaceships. But there are many games which are equally as welcoming, but don't fall back on such well-worn mechanisms or theming. Number 3, a great product grows with its user. My farm shop is largely the same from one game to the next. The deck of cards is changed up slightly each time you play, so there is an element of variety, but it never really feels any different. There are 3 expansion modules in my farm shop. The first simply allows you to select cards to customize your fields before the game begins, so players are starting from a different position to each other. The second module introduces 2 goals for players to achieve, and the first and second players to meet the conditions of these goal cards get bonus points. The third module adds a farmer card in one of the spots on the display, and when the farmer card is selected with a dice, instead of upgrading the farm, the player takes 2 transport tiles from the supply, and you can spend these transport tiles later to use farmer abilities which manipulate your resources in various different ways, or swap the positions of your fields, or modify the effects of your dice results, and so on. I'm always a bit torn with mini expansion modules like this. I never quite know which version of the game to play. I can tie myself up in knots trying to work out which is the best version of the game. What's the designer's intended version? What was the version they originally envisaged? Were the modules cut out of the original game to make it simpler? Or were they added in by the publisher to give a more complex alternative for advanced players? Which version of the game should I play when I'm playing with new people? Of course, none of this really matters if the modules add to the game experience or make it more customizable to your personal tastes, but the truth is that none of the modules this time really add all that much. The game becomes ever so slightly harder to set up, ever so slightly harder to teach, and it gives the game ever such a slight bit more variety. But there's no big payoff when you incorporate one of these modules. If you're losing interest in the game, you're not going to revive it with asymmetric player boards or individual objectives. I'm just not sure who these modules are actually for. Number 4, branding. If it wasn't such an overused title, I could see a company running with the my ... naming. I could easily imagine that same dead-eyed lady in a firefighter's outfit on the cover of My Fire Station, or in a white coat on the cover of My Laboratory. But I don't think it's going to happen. Perhaps more importantly, the Pegasus brand and the Rudiger Dorn brand are untarnished by this release. It's hardly lifted them to new heights, but it is a solid enough experience. So let's return to The Hook, an engine-building game about running a farm. Well, in 2021, that's a pretty weak hook. Game store shelves are bowing under the weight of many farming games on the market. Most of them involve a fair amount of engine building. Commercial success is achieved when a great idea is paired with outstanding execution. And I'm struggling to describe the core concept of my farm shop as anything other than pretty mediocre. If we consider the execution of the product, well, let's return to the promises made by the Gamebox, a game for youngsters. Well, not really. I mean, it's a bit too complex. A game about managing a shop. Well, not really. I mean, it's far too abstract for that. A gentle, pleasant, forgettable experience? Yeah, it pretty much delivers there. But as always, Pegasus and Rudiger Dorn have the knowledge and vast experience to ensure that this one isn't a complete dud. And hence, on my chart, it just about edges into the green section, which means it's hardly going to set the world alight, and it's not going to be a perennial bestseller, and I don't think you'll be hearing gamers talking about the game for years to come, but the game is fine. It's literally quite good. It may not provide much for avid gamers to get stuck into, but for the casual market, it's going to offer up a few hours of easygoing gameplay. If you'd like to see more videos like this, please hit like, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you next time.